Taxi took a grimy Manhattan garage and somehow turned it into one of TV's funniest and quietly saddest places to work. When it premiered in 1978, we got dropped right into the Sunshine Cab Company with Judd Hirsch's level-headed Alex Reiger, Danny DeVito's nightmare dispatcher Louis De Palma, Tony Danza's big-dreaming boxer Tony Banta, Marilu Henner's sharp Elaine Nardo, Jeff Conaway's struggling actor Bobby Wheeler, Andy Kaufman's wonderfully weird Locke Gravis, and Christopher Lloyd's permanently checked-out Reverend Jim. They were all killing time between fares, waiting for their real lives to start. Haven't we all felt that way at some point? Over 5 seasons, 2 networks, a parade of guest stars, and plenty of Emmys, Taxi became the kind of character-driven comedy that wasn't afraid to admit life can be messy, disappointing, and downright unfair. But behind the late-night jazz, garage jokes, and that lonely cab crossing the bridge was an even crazier story. Unexpected casting, backstage heartbreak, network chaos, and one performer who treated a sitcom set like his own personal performance art experiment. Here are 15 surprising facts about Taxi. 1. The magazine article that inspired Taxi. Taxi didn't start with a punchline. Weirdly enough, it started with a magazine article. Back in 1975, writer Mark Jacobson published a New York Magazine piece called Night Shifting for the Hip Fleet about the Dover Taxi Garage on Hudson Street. He didn't just pop in, take notes, and leave. He actually worked the night shift himself, driving for hours and soaking up the stories of the guys around him. These weren't people who dreamed of driving cabs their whole lives. They were stuck in between. Take David, a philosopher who'd nearly finished his PhD. All that schooling had landed him one gig, $25 a night teaching ethics to rookie cops. The rest of the time, he was behind the wheel, probably wondering the same thing we've all wondered. How did temporary turn into my life? That question became the heart of Taxi. The Sunshine Cab Company lives in that awkward gap between the life you have and the life you thought you'd have. Almost everyone is waiting for something bigger, an art career, a boxing title, a way out. And here's what makes the show hit. It never promises they'll get it. The laughs are there, but underneath them is something quieter and way more real, a little resignation, a little hope, and a feeling Jacobson found in that garage years before Taxi ever hit television. 2. Angela was never meant to be the theme song. Few TV themes fit their show as perfectly as Taxi's Angela. That drifting jazz piano feels like a 2 a.m. cab ride through city streets that somehow never take you where you thought you were going. But here's the crazy part. It almost wasn't the theme at all. Bob James originally wrote Angela as background music for one episode called Blind Date, where Alex goes out with a woman named Angela and the night doesn't exactly go great. The song was named after her, meant to play under one quiet moment and then vanish. The real opening theme was supposed to be another Bob James track called Touchdown, brighter, brassier, and way more upbeat. Then the producers tried Angela over that shot of the lone cab crossing the Queensboro Bridge at night. How do you hear that piano with those images and not know you found it? Touchdown was out. Angela moved to the opening, and suddenly a little piece of background music written for one bad date became the sound that welcomed you into every story Taxi would ever tell. 3. The opening credits were filmed on a real New York bridge. That opening sequence wasn't studio trickery. The yellow cab gliding across the bridge in the credits is a real checker cab driving across the real Queensboro Bridge, shot on location in New York City at a time when many sitcoms stayed safely inside sound stages. Behind the wheel was Tony Danza, on his very first day working on the series. There was no controlled bubble of closed streets, just a camera, an actor, and New York traffic. The shot itself only lasted about 15 seconds, so editors looped the same pass over the bridge several times to stretch it into a full opening. According to the lore around the shoot, at least one New Yorker tried to hail the cab mid-take, assuming it was working, not filming. That's how natural the whole thing looked, a solitary taxi, part of the endless flow, yet somehow isolated within it. 4. Tony Danza changed his character forever. Tony Banta wasn't a polished Hollywood creation. He was basically pulled straight out of a boxing gym. Before Taxi, Tony Danza wasn't an actor chasing roles. He was a real fighter training and competing in New York. Producers found him drawn less by his resume, which was practically non-existent, and more by his presence. He showed up to his audition with a black eye and a broken hand from a recent knockout. No formal training, no crafted monologue, just a beaten-up middleweight with a natural charm that producers didn't want to let walk out the door. The original character was an Irish heavyweight named Phil Ryan, written as punch-drunk and slow. Once Danza was cast, they rewired the role completely. The punch-drunk edge was smoothed away, the weight class shifted to match Danza's real life, and then producers worried about something even simpler. On a chaotic sitcom set, would this new performer respond reliably to a made-up name? So Phil Banta became Tony Banta. Across the next 2 decades, Danza would handle 4 different sitcoms playing a character named Tony. It all started here, with a boxer who walked into an audition and changed the script just by standing in front of it. 5. The guest stars who became TV legends. Look through Taxi's episodes now, and the garage reads like a time capsule of future television. Young Tom Hanks appeared in a Season 4 flashback as Gordon, Reverend Jim's college roommate. This was 1982, 2 years before Splash and long before Forrest Gump. Ted Danson turned up playing a flamboyant hairstylist who gives Elaine a disastrous makeover. The man who would soon become Sam Malone spent his Taxi appearance wielding scissors instead of beer mugs. Tom Waits made a memorable stop in Memories of Cab 804, and Mandy Patinkin was in that episode too. Penny Marshall arrived as herself, transitioning into the directing career that would give audiences big. George went past through playing an exterminator, and not long after, Danson would join Taxi director James Burrows over on Cheers as Norm and Sam. Taxi's garage was fiction. The roster of people who walked through it turned out to be an accidental scouting report for the entire decade of television that followed. 6. Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman brought real-life chemistry. Louie De Palma's most volatile relationship didn't have to manufacture chemistry. It was already there. Zena Sherman, Louie's on-again, off-again girlfriend, was played by Rhea Perlman. By the time she first appeared on Taxi in 1979, Perlman and DeVito had been together for years. They would marry in 1982 while the show was still on the air. That history changed the way their scenes played. Louie and Zena don't trade cute sitcom banter. They fight, they yell, they lob insults and expose the desperation underneath Louie's bluster. Perlman only appeared in 6 episodes across 3 seasons, but every visit cut deeper than a standard girlfriend of the week storyline. Within a few years, she would be behind the bar at Cheers as Carla Tortelli, another sharp-tongued woman sparring with flawed men, this time for 11 seasons. 7. Reverend Jim was supposed to appear only once. Reverend Jim Ignatowski was never meant to be part of the core cast. Christopher Lloyd first appeared in the Season 1 episode Paper Marriage, playing a burned-out minister drafted to perform a sham wedding to help Laka avoid deportation. On paper it was simple. Walk in, be strange, solve the plot problem, walk out. Then the audience heard him speak. Lloyd's performance, half murmured, slightly delayed, as if Jim's mind was 3 rooms away from his body, ignited the studio with the kind of rolling laughter writers dream about. The creative team changed course immediately. Jim returned in Season 2 for Reverend Jim, A Space Odyssey, delivering one of the great scenes in sitcom history. Jim sitting at a written driving test, staring at the question, "What does a yellow light mean?" and needing the entire room's whispered prompts just to process it. A character invented to solve a single plot problem became one of the show's most beloved creations. 8. Reverend Jim's iconic jacket had a surprising origin. Jim's inner fog had a visual match, that battered denim jacket. It didn't come from a costume rack. Christopher Lloyd borrowed it from a friend in Laurel Canyon, abandoned and weather-scarred, with a peace sign stamped on the back like a relic from a protest that never quite changed the world. Lloyd recognized it instantly as Reverend Jim's entire backstory in a single garment. He wore it to his audition paired with worn jeans and old sneakers, showed up unshaven and wild-haired, and a Paramount receptionist reportedly mistook him for a homeless man until she saw his name on the schedule. No one asked him to clean up. The producers told him to wear exactly that when cameras rolled, and he did, episode after episode. That rescued jacket became as iconic as Jim's spaced-out delivery, a piece of the 1960s that had lost its way and ended up in a 1970s taxi garage, just like the man wearing it. 9. Marilu Henner's incredible memory solved taxi trivia. For most actors, a long-running series blurs into impressions and set stories. For Marilu Henner, it's all still there in perfect focus. Henner, who plays Elaine Nardo, lives with highly superior autobiographical memory, a rare condition allowing her to recall specific details of nearly every day of her life. Fewer than 100 people worldwide are believed to have it. She remembers learning she'd landed the role on Sunday, June 4, 1978, at a premiere party for Grease. The first table read, Wednesday, June 5, 1978. The first filming day, Friday, June 14, 1978. Not just sometime that summer, exact dates in permanent ink. Her recall even squared the record books. While many sources list Taxi as having 114 episodes, Henner points out that only 112 unique episodes were actually produced. The other 2 were clip shows. She knows because she was there on every single filming day and remembers each one. 10. Jeff Conaway's real-life struggles changed the show. Bobby Wheeler was supposed to be Jeff Conaway's springboard. Instead, the role sat uncomfortably close to a real struggle he was already losing. Before Taxi, Conaway played Kenickie in Grease, the swaggering best friend nearly charismatic enough to tilt the entire film. But during that production, he suffered a serious back injury that never fully healed. Pain management turned into dependence, and by the time he was standing in the Sunshine Cab Company, he was fighting addiction to prescription painkillers and cocaine. Then came the day he didn't make it to set, found on the floor of his dressing room, unable to perform. His lines were quietly reassigned, and once the writers saw how easily the show absorbed his absence, a focal point character started to look like someone they could function without. Conaway left as a regular after season 3. His addiction battle continued publicly for decades, eventually playing out on Celebrity Rehab. In 2011, he died at age 60. On screen, Bobby Wheeler was always one audition away from getting out of the garage. Off-screen, Jeff Conaway never quite escaped. 11. The Emmy-winning sitcom that struggled in the ratings. By almost any creative measure, Taxi was a success. 18 Emmy Awards, Outstanding Comedy Series 3 years in a row, and a permanent place on the Writers Guild of America's list of the best-written shows of all time. The ratings told a different story. After a respectable 10th place finish in Season 1, the audience began to thin. Subsequent years dropped the show out of the top 30 altogether, while broader hits like Three's Company and The Dukes of Hazzard pulled in massive weekly audiences. The network shuffled Taxi from Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday, trying to find a night where it might catch fire. Ironically, the show that kept being told it wasn't popular enough has been in syndication for more than 40 years. Quiet, carefully written stories have a way of lingering well past the noise of the moment. 12. Taxi was cancelled, then saved by another network. Taxi's ending didn't feel like an ending because no one involved knew it was one. In 1982, after 4 seasons, ABC canceled the show following a ratings slide tied more to schedule shuffling than quality. Then NBC did something unusual. It stepped in and picked up the series for a 5th season. To promote the move, the network ran a spot with Danny DeVito growling, "Same time, better station." But the numbers never turned around. No one told the cast or crew this would be the last year. The final episode aired June 15, 1983, and plays like any other mid-run installment. No farewell to the garage, no wrapping up of dreams, just people clocking out as if they'd be back next week. The cast even threw a wrap party expecting another season. For a show built around lives that rarely reached the finish lines their owners imagined, an abrupt non-ending turned out to be strangely appropriate. 13. Andy Kaufman invented Latka's entire language. Latka gravis could have been a simple gag, funny accent, nonsense syllables, confusion. Andy Kaufman wasn't interested in shortcuts. The bizarre speech patterns Latka used weren't random sounds improvised on the spot. Kaufman and collaborator Bob Zmuda built a fully structured fake language with consistent vowel combinations, recurring phrases, and internal logic only they fully understood. Carol Kane, who played Locke's wife Simca, had to learn this invented language as if it were real. Kaufman even took her to a Chinese restaurant and required her to order and converse entirely in Locke's tongue for hours, turning dinner into an immersive dialect workshop. The effect is subtle but powerful. Viewers can't understand the words, but they sense the character does, making Locke and Simca feel emotionally grounded even when nothing they say is technically real. 14. Danny DeVito turned Louie into a TV legend. Louie De Palma began on the page as something much smaller, a minor dispatcher who would rarely leave his wire cage, tossing out barked orders before receding into the background. Then Danny DeVito walked into the audition room and refused to stay small. Before Taxi, DeVito was known mainly for playing Martini in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. His peers were wary of television, but he read the pilot and wanted Louie badly. He strode into the room, threw the script down in front of James L. Brooks and three of the most powerful comedy writers in television, and demanded to know who wrote this garbage. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then the room erupted. From that moment, DeVito recalled almost anything he said landed. He filled Louie's cage with personal touches, including a signed photo of Robert De Niro as a private nod to Taxi Driver. In 1981, he won the Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series, and Louie De Palma became a character audiences would love to hate for decades. 15. Andy Kaufman's Tony Clifton chaos shocked the set. Andy Kaufman did not like sitcoms. He saw them as formula, confinement, and canned laughter, which makes his time on Taxi one of the strangest stories in television history. When producers first approached him, he declined. He finally agreed on one condition: he would bring his existing foreign man character, unchanged, to the show. His contract also limited him to roughly 14 episodes per season so he could maintain his stand-up work, and he minimized rehearsal time, believing too much polish flattened spontaneity. Then he pushed further. Kaufman demanded that his notorious alter ego, lounge singer Tony Clifton, be hired as a guest star with his own separate contract and billing. Producers agreed, likely without imagining how far he would take it. When it came time to shoot, Tony Clifton arrived in full regalia, sunglasses, cheap suit, sideburns, flanked by sex workers, and an openly defiant attitude. He insulted cast members, refused direction, missed cues, and made himself impossible to work with until security escorted Clifton off the Paramount lot. Many crew members believed they were watching the actual firing of a real guest star. Years later, the chaos was restaged in the film Man on the Moon, with Jim Carrey playing Kaufman playing Clifton being dragged out of the studio. Rather than let Kaufman go, Taxi absorbed him. Writers eventually gave Locke multiple personality disorder, so he could inhabit radically different personas within the script. Most sitcoms would have quietly cut a performer that was challenging loose. Taxi didn't, and in doing so proved that even within a studio system, there's room, however chaotic, for something that looks a lot like performance art.